In the last video, we covered the cancelled Batman project and the Bat Family project. This time we'll be covering Superman, a hero who also has a lot of cancelled projects, unsurprisingly. I'm not the biggest fan of Superman, so I'm less annoyed by how many of these got cancelled, but it was interesting to see how many original ideas got cancelled, as opposed to, continuations and sequels of various, pre-existing Superman content, which is always interesting to see. So yes, let's have a look at the cancelled Superman projects. Superman 3 Supergirl was an original pitch for the movie that expanded the universe to include Brainiac and Mxyzptlk and Supergirl, who was going to have a romantic relationship with Superman. Um, okay, but the studio, who at this point were behind the original Superman, the original Christopher Reeve Superman movies, said no and made their own Superman 3. Thank God, because I do not think this version would be very popular. Now, there was a pitch for a Superman 5 before the failure of Superman 4, and the film would have seen Superman die and then be resurrected in the bottled Kryptonian city of Kandor that Brainiac owned, but the studio went bankrupt after 4, so this never came to pass. There was a film called Superman Reborn. This one was a planned adaptation of the Death of Superman storyline, with Lois and Clark having relationship troubles in time for Doomsday to appear and kill Clark, whose proclamation of love would transfer his soul into her creator child, which would become the new Superman. Am I reading this right? This went through several different rewrites and versions before it was eventually cancelled. Superman Lives was one of the most famous cancelled Superman projects that had John Peters as the producer, who consistently came up with crazy ideas for this movie, including that Superman shouldn't fly. WB eventually pulled the plug because the budget was getting too high. I am not doing this one justice. There's tons of information on Wikipedia. There is a whole documentary film about it, and so there's so much stuff to look at, like the mad ideas and what went into this production. It was going to cast Nick Cage as Superman, and actually it got like a little sort of cameo at the end of the Flash movie, if anyone actually cared about wanting to watch the Flash movie. Superman Flyby was J.J. Abrams' pitch for an origin story that had a civil war on Krypton, and it reveals his identity, brings a bunch of Kryptonians to Earth, is killed and meets his father in heaven, and then is resurrected and defeats the Kryptonians before flying off into space. I think this one got reworked a little into Man of Steel in 2013, because there's a lot of similarities with things that happened in that movie. There was a cancelled Superman Return sequel. Bryan Singer, the bastard, wanted to make a more action-packed follow-up to the film that would add more Kryptonians, like Brainiac. I don't know why Brainiac's not Kryptonian, that's incorrect. But this film was scrapped when Returns underperformed. That's just what happens. There was obviously a Man of Steel sequel was planned for a long, long time, and it was through development hell through several iterations, mostly affected by, of course, the failures of the DCEU. Cavill, of course, came back for Black Adam, was rehired and then fired within 2 weeks. Michael B. Jordan had also pitched a Black Superman film, but none of these have ever been picked up, and probably never will, especially given we have a new Superman coming out fairly soon. The Superman spin-off series was after Superman Brainiac Attacks, and the director pitched an idea for a series connected to The Batman, the animated series, but this was never realized. It was more of an idea rather than a full-on series. There was an untitled Superman project, which was an unmade animated one, but it was pitched and it never got past the development stage. There was a Superman DC Nation project, which was done by Genndy Tartakovsky, the genius behind Primal, Clone Wars, and Samurai Jack. He produced a Superman short for CN, but this was before they cancelled a massive, massive block of animation, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with, the Cartoon Network animation sort of cancellation. Superman Red Sun live action was pitched as part of the DCEU, but WB refused, although it obviously was animated in 2020. It was originally a live action, they turned it back into an animated film, as they have done with a few stories, I think. The Adventures of Superboy there was a pilot produced for this, though it wasn't picked up, and though it would have become the Superboy and Smallville shows that were released. There was The Adventures of Superpup, which was an unaired pilot intended to capitalize, like The Adventures of Superboy, on the success of The Adventures of Superman show, but was ultimately scrapped. There was a Bizarro film done by the team who made Galaxy Quest, but this obviously never materialized either. There was a Metropolis series, which the team behind Gotham were given a 13-episode order for a similar show based in Metropolis, though in May 2018 it was redeveloped and no new news has been released. I doubt it will be, given that since then James Gunn has been put in charge of DC and probably wants to focus majority of his time on the DCU. Matt Reeves obviously has his Batman universe, but then we also have a few of the sort of Elseworlds animated projects, but I think anything that was sort of not cancelled but kind of in a limbo state is most likely cancelled now, given he has to work on the DCU. There was a Superman Family animated series, which was rejected in favour of the Harley Quinn show, which was the latter is a good show. The artwork for what this show would have been makes it look so charming and so fun, but I think My Adventures with Superman has taken on some of the elements of that, which is good. There was the DCEU Supergirl movie, and Sasha Calle, who was in The Flash, was going to have her own Supergirl movie in 2018, but this was scrapped and she appeared in the Flash movie instead. And last but not least, there was an untitled Val Zod series in 2021, which would have been a limited HBO series about Val Zod planned for DCU, with Michael B. Jordan to star in. This was sort of a continuation of his plans to make a Black Superman movie. Once again, don't think it's going to happen anymore, or at least not in the immediate future, given James Gunn's now in charge of DC. So that's all of the cancelled Superman projects. Next episode is going to be moved on to Wonder Woman, who actually has slightly less than most of the previous ones, which is good to see, but also Wonder Woman doesn't have nearly as much content as the others.